The difference between an idiot and a genius is that a genius knows exactly which rules to break, and more importantly, why. Private First Class Murphy Murph Delgado didn't consider himself a genius, but he knew for a fact that the rules at Aegis Command Academy were broken, biased, and begging for a good shattering. So he figured he'd give them a hand, or rather, deny him his eyes.
Cadets Delgado.
The voice was a discordant symphony of gurgling fluid and clipped synthesized English, like a drowning man giving a lecture.
Remove that ridiculous affectation at once, or face immediate disqualification from this exercise.
Murph, standing at the starting line of the Academy's infamous obstacle course, the Gauntlet, didn't turn. He just kept bobbing his head, the tinny beat of an ancient Earth song leaking from the headphones of a battered music player clipped to his belt. A simple strip of black cloth was tied firmly over his eyes. He gave a lazy two-fingered salute in the general direction of the noise. "Just leveling up the playing field, Lieutenant Kreeslax. Wouldn't want anyone to think I have an unfair advantage." A low ripple of snickers and groans passed through the assembled cadets. They were a menagerie of the galaxy's finest military youth. Hulking, crag-skinned Gronians, energy-based Sinti who appeared as columns of heat-distorted air, and a handful of ramrod-straight Aetolians, their posture so rigid it seemed a physical expression of their contempt for the lone human. Lieutenant Kreeslax, a six-limbed cephalid whose lower tentacles were suctioned firmly to the deck plating, glided forward, his large, intelligent eyes housed in a translucent dome of a head narrowed.
Your species' penchant for melodrama is not a tactical asset, human. It is a liability. This is your final warning.
Kreeslax tensed, ready to sound the disqualification alarm, but he hesitated. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the human was galling.
Let him.
A cold, calculating part of his mind gurgled.
Let him try. His failure will be all the more public, all the more absolute, a far more effective lesson than a simple dismissal.
"Loud and clear, sir," Murph said cheerfully. A deafening buzzer shrieked. The other cadets exploded from their starting blocks. Murph remained motionless for a single perfect second. He wasn't looking. He was listening. He was feeling the thud of 20 different species footfalls on the pressurized deck plates, the faint whine of the plasma conduits lining the course, the whisper of air displaced by the first set of hydraulic pistons. The music served a deeper purpose. The driving, predictable 4/4 time signature of the rock anthem created a framework, a rhythmic lattice upon which his brain could hang the chaotic sensory data, turning a storm of input into a predictable weather pattern. The beat became his targeting software. He took a deep breath, and then he was gone. He didn't run, he flowed. He was a river of motion carving a path through the static landscape of the course. Each step and turn, not a decision, but a reaction, an inevitable consequence of the symphony of sounds and pressures he alone could perceive. The first obstacle was a series of pressure plates that triggered high-speed pistons from the walls. Cadets scrambled to memorize the sequence, leaping and dodging. Kreeslax watched, his tentacles coiling in irritation as Murph sprinted straight for the first trap. The Aetolian cadet next to Murph leaped elegantly over the plate. The piston shot out with a pneumatic hiss. Instead of avoiding it, Murph planted his foot on the edge of the trigger plate just as it depressed. He didn't try to dodge the piston. He jumped on the cylindrical casing as it rocketed out. For a split second he rode it, launching himself in a perfect 3-meter arc that carried him over the rest of the trap. He landed perfectly past the entire sequence. The machine had done the work for him.
Unorthodox, but effective.
Kreeslax gurgled, his vocalizer struggling to keep the rage out of his monotone delivery. Next came the Weaver, a crisscrossing mesh of live plasma wires humming with lethal energy, carrying the sharp scent of superheated insulators and the sterile tang of ionized air. The standard procedure was a slow, careful crawl underneath. Murph tilted his head, listening to the distinct pitches of the different wires. They, too, were a song. He found the rhythm in their hum, the pattern in their vibrations. He leaped, his hands catching the inert support struts, and swung through the gaps with the fluid grace of a gymnast, the lethal energy crackling inches from his face. He moved by sound, not sight. The course continued. He felt the sharp rush of air from a hidden dart trap, a sudden drop in pressure against his cheek, and dropped to a slide a nanosecond before a volley of fletchets whispered past. He navigated a zero-gravity section not by sight, but by listening to the distinct whine and echo of the maneuvering thrusters as the sounds bounced off the chamber walls, triangulating his position through a complex model of echolocation. The other cadets fought the course. Murph danced with it. He could hear Kreeslax's gurgles growing more agitated, the wet slap of his tentacles on the deck as he paced. He could hear the stunned silence of the other cadets. The final obstacle was a 10-meter wall climb. Cadets clawed their way up using standardized grips. Murph ran towards it, listening. He heard the faint, high-frequency stress groans in the wall structure, the telltale sign of maintenance bolts. They weren't on the official path. They were a meter to the left. He jumped, his fingers finding the bolt heads, and scaled the wall in a blur of motion, his feet finding purchase on seams invisible to the naked eye. He vaulted over the top and landed on the finish line with a soft thud. He clicked off his music player, and the world dissolved back into a muted, dark confusion. He stood there, panting softly, waiting. For a moment, the only sound was the soft panting of his own breath. The usual post-exercise clamor of cadets and machinery was absent, replaced by a weight of stunned quiet. Then the station's main display flickered. Course time, 1 minute, 55 seconds. Academy record, 2 minutes, 14 seconds. 2 minutes, 14 seconds. Status, obliterated. Murph smiled, adjusting his blindfold. How'd I do, sir? Kreeslax's tentacles were coiled so tightly they looked like knots in a bundle of slick gray cables. He glided over to Murph, each movement of his body a clipped, furious gesture. Without a word, he snatched the blindfold from Murph's face. Murph blinked in the harsh light, his pupils contracting. Hey, I wasn't done with that. The lieutenant inspected the strip of cloth. It was just that, a simple piece of black fabric, slightly sweat-stained. No hidden optics, no microsensors, no technological trickery. He crumpled it in one of his upper limbs. His vocalizer crackled, spitting static between words as if the fury itself were overloading the circuits.
Report to my office. 0800 tomorrow. We will have a discussion about your future at this institution, or lack thereof.
He turned and slid away, his rigid back a testament to his outrage. The other cadets stared at Murph, a mixture of awe, fear, and deep, profound confusion on their varied faces. They parted before him as he walked towards the locker room, a clear bubble of space forming around the human who had just broken their reality. Later that night, in his private quarters, the air thick with the scent of brine and the clean, sharp smell of energized filters from his personal filtration unit, Lieutenant Kreeslax sat before his console. The humidity was precisely controlled to mimic the tidal flats of his home world, a place of order, logic, and predictable currents. A place where something like Murph Delgado could not exist.
Access personal file.
He gurgled.
Cadet Private First Class Murphy Delgado. Earth.
The file appeared. Kreeslax's primary objective was simple. Find grounds for immediate expulsion, insubordination, reckless endangerment, failure to adhere to uniform standards, anything. He would scrub this chaotic human stain from his pristine academy. He pulled up the entrance exam scores, ready to find the data point that proved Delgado was a fluke, a statistical error. He stopped. His manipulators froze over the console. Aptitude Tactical Analysis, 99.8th percentile. Aptitude Spatial Reasoning, 99.9th percentile. Aptitude Threat Assessment, 99.7th percentile. Psychological Profile, Aberrant Nonlinear Problem Solver, High Tolerance for Chaotic Variables. Recommended for Unconventional Warfare Division. Kreeslax leaned back, the soft suction of his tentacles on his chair the only sound in the room. The profile painted a picture not of a fool, but of something far more complicated. He pulled up a second file, cross-referencing Delgado's listed next of kin and emergency contacts. The cadet who had washed out the previous year. The friend Murph had mentioned in his application interview. A brilliant by-the-book soldier from Earth named Corporal Ines Soloviv. Her file showed a perfect record until her final test, a no-win hostage simulation. A simulation, Kreeslax noted with a flicker of shame, that had been designed by Aetolian tacticians and recently flagged in a system review for containing specific, unfair, anti-human psychological biases. Soloviv's career was over. The protest had been more than melodrama. It was revenge. In the mess hall, the universe was a treacherous landscape of unseen obstacles. Off-duty, off the zone, Murph was just a guy who couldn't see. He had kept the blindfold on, partly out of sheer stubbornness, and partly because taking it off now would feel like admitting he was just showing off. He shuffled forward in the food line, one hand tracing the guide rail. Is this the nutrient paste line or the nutrient slurry line? Slurry gives me gas. A calm, dry thought echoed in his mind, feeling less like a voice and more like the concept of wry amusement. It is the paste line, Earthman. The slurry is to your left. I would advise against it. The scent profile suggests a high sulfide content today. Murph grinned. Thanks, Glorbin. You're a lifesaver. Glorbin, a humanoid colony of telepathic mycelium, whose form seemed to waver like heat haze, perched silently on a floating grav disk, hovered beside him. Its body was a constantly shifting network of fungal threads, and its thoughts were translated by a small device on its disk into perfectly composed deadpan observations. Your gratitude is noted. It is a small service in return for the great cleansing. Murph still had no idea what the great cleansing was. He had had a bad cold during his first week, and in a shared transport with the mycoid delegation, he'd let out a massive, earth-shattering sneeze. He was oblivious to the fact that a unique phage in his human mucus had wiped out a parasitic blight that had plagued Glorbin's home colony for generations. To Glorbin, Murph wasn't a cadet. He was a walking, talking, biological miracle. As Murph collected his tray of beige paste, a shadow fell over him. The air pressure shifted. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the floor. Human, The voice was a low, gravelly rasp that vibrated through the deck plates.
Your stunt in the gauntlet was a disgrace. You mock this institution. You mock us all.
Murph tilted his head, focusing. He couldn't see the hulking 8-foot cadet, a rocky-skinned Borgian whose species communicated primarily through ritualized combat. He didn't register the aggressive posture, the furious glare, or the fists clenched so tightly they looked like geological formations. All his senses processed was the sound, a harsh, labored wheezing between the words. The scent of stressed minerals from the Borgian's hide, the subtle tremor in his voice. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a small packet.
You sound dehydrated, big guy,
Murph said, his voice laced with genuine concern. He held out a packet.
Here, electrolyte tab. You should really take better care of yourself. That wheeze sounds nasty.
The Borgian, Oroto, froze. He had been ready for a fight, a challenge, a cowering apology. He was not prepared for medical advice. He stared at the small packet in the blindfolded human's hand. Oroto's stony fist, which had been clenched tight enough to pulverize carbon, slowly uncurled. The sheer, unexpected sincerity of the gesture completely disarmed him. It was so outside his cultural context for conflict that his brain simply short-circuited. He grunted, a confused, frustrated sound, snatched the tab from Murph's hand, and stomped away without another word. Lorben drifted closer.
Fascinating. You have weaponized anticlimax. Oroto's biosignature indicates a state of extreme cognitive dissonance. He may need to sit down. He just sounded thirsty,
Murph mumbled, trying to locate his fork by patting his tray.
Is that so weird? For this place, Earthmen, Glorben projected. Profoundly so.
The air in Kreeslax's office was heavy, a wet blanket of brine that clung to the inside of Murph's nostrils. A sharp, clean tang from the energized filtration unit cut through it, a high note in a bass-heavy chord of humidity. Murph stood at attention, blindfolded firmly in place, listening to the gentle sloshing from the filtration unit and the soft hiss of Kreeslax's tentacles moving across his desk.
Cadet Delgado,
the vocalizer began, devoid of its earlier rage, now honed to a sharp, professional edge.
Your performance in the gauntlet was, by official metrics, successful. The record has been logged. Commandant Year has taken an interest.
The last 3 words were spoken as if they were a disgusting type of mold.
However,
Kreeslax continued,
your method was an act of blatant insubordination. You violated uniform protocol. You disregarded a direct order from a superior officer. By all rights, I should have you cleaning plasma conduits with a toothbrush for the next rotation.
Is that an official assignment, sir? Murph asked. Because I've got a great playlist for conduit cleaning. Kreeslax ignored him.
Your protest, as you call it, is noted. Its purpose, while misguided, is understood. But let me be unequivocally clear. This indulgence ends now. The Aetolian delegation has lodged a formal complaint. They see your actions as a deliberate insult to their training doctrines. You are on thin ice, floating in a sea of fire.
Metaphorically speaking, I assume, Murph said.
From this moment forward, you will be held to a higher standard than any other cadet in this academy's history,
Kreeslax stated, his voice dropping.
Any failure, however minor, a single misstep in a simulation, a fractional point below perfection on an exam, a toe out of line during inspection, will result in your immediate and permanent expulsion. There will be no warnings. There will be no second chances. Am I understood?
Murph's cheerful demeanor finally faded. He stood a little straighter. Understood, sir.
Dismissed.
Murph executed a perfect, crisp about face and walked out. His steps even and sure. He didn't need to see the door. He had mapped out the room by sound the moment he had entered. Kreeslax was left alone in his humid sanctuary, staring at the closed door. He looked back at the file on his screen, at the staggering scores and the absurd psychological profile. The contradiction was a puzzle that grated on his logical mind, a piece of data that refused to fit the established model. He wanted to hate the human, but a small, terrifying part of him was beginning to realize that the human might just be right. The rules were broken, and that was a thought far more dangerous than any blindfolded stunt. Dr. Tula Knox hummed a jaunty off-key tune, her fingers tapping and swiping across a holographic interface. Her lab was a chaotic masterpiece of organized clutter, wires snaking across the floor like metallic vines, and spare alien psychology probes propped up in coffee mugs. She was everything the Academy was not: messy, unpredictable, and gloriously unhinged. And a little tweak here, she muttered to herself, her eyes alight with an obsessive curiosity. A minor fluctuation in the cultural empathy subroutines there. On her main screen was the architecture for the next cadet trial, a diplomatic hostage simulation. The scenario was a tense standoff with a holographic recreation of the Corsairs of the Outer Rim. A perfect boring by-the-book test. Tula grinned. Boring is bad for the data. As the original architect of the Academy's psychological simulation software, she knew its back doors better than she knew her own relatives. She slipped past the security safeguards like a ghost. She wasn't malicious, she was just curious. Her fringe theory was that human chaos was a quantifiable combat variable, and Cadet Delgado was the most beautiful test subject she had ever encountered. She found the Corsair AI's cultural parameter file. Her movements were swift and economical, inserting a single line of code, masking it as one of the benign data packet corruptions she herself had coded into the system's error logs years ago. Cultural Directive 734, the humiliation taboo. Any direct attempt at diplomatic bargaining, pleading, or negotiation from an inferior force is to be interpreted as the highest insult. Protocol: immediate execution of hostage. She leaned back, admiring her handiwork. They always logged as harmless glitches. She was very, very good at this. All right, Murph, she whispered to the empty room. Let's see how you talk your way out of a problem you're not allowed to talk about. Show me some beautiful, chaotic data. Inside the simulation, the bridge of the Corsair raiding ship was all jagged metal and flickering red emergency lights. The air smelled of stale, recycled oxygen and the faint, coppery tang of fierce sweat from the hostage. The pirate captain, a burly drusk with tusks like daggers, had his plasma rifle pressed to the head of a trembling ambassador.
One more word about reasonable terms, and I decorate this bulkhead with his brain matter.
The Corsair bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. Murph ignored the pirate's shouting. He was listening to the undercurrents. The Corsair captain's voice was strained. His breathing was shallow. The crew behind him were fidgeting, their armor creaking. They weren't confident conquerors. They were stressed. He leaned towards Glorbin. They sound wound up and hungry. Glorbin, my friend, do me a favor. I exist to serve the great progenitor of the cleansing. Glorben projected with his usual dryness. Ask them if they've eaten recently, Murph whispered. Glorben paused, its mycelial form pulsing gently. An unorthodox diplomatic overture. But then, I've come to expect nothing less. The telepathic query shot across the bridge. It wasn't a demand or a plea. It was a simple, bizarre question. The blind one wishes to know if you have partaken in a recent meal. He senses gastric distress. The Corsair captain blinked, his finger easing off the trigger. What? Did he just ask if we've had lunch? His crew members murmured in confusion. The entire script of the simulation, threaten, demand, execute, had been derailed. Murph didn't wait for an answer. Glorben, where's the galley on this rust bucket? 37 degrees to your left, past the snarling crewman with the vibrating dagger. It appears to be a standard G9 model nutrient synthesizer. Perfect. Murph strode confidently across the bridge, deftly stepping around the befuddled pirates. He found the synthesizer panel and began slapping buttons, guided by Glorben's telepathic directions. Okay, let's see what we've got here, he announced to the room. Reconstituted protein base, a little bit of a yeast extract for that savory kick. Needs more salt. He started making loud, appreciative cooking noises. Now, the key to a good soup is a slow simmer. You can't rush perfection. This is going to be a hearty, life-affirming broth. Good for morale. Now, who wants a bowl? The pirates stared, their weapons lowered slightly. They had programming for combat, for negotiation, for cruelty. They had absolutely no programming for a hostage negotiator who decided to make them soup. The AI running the simulation frantically searched its databases. This wasn't a threat, it wasn't a negotiation, it wasn't even an insult. It was so far outside the established parameters that the system could only classify it under one obscure protocol. Analysis, unknown cultural interaction, potential novel gesture of goodwill, classifying as cultural overture, type 8, communal food preparation. Response, de-escalate hostilities. Await further cultural exchange. The Corsair captain slowly lowered his rifle. He looked at the hostage, then at the human happily simmering a pot of imaginary soup. He grunted.
Fine. But if it's bland, he gets spaced.
A notification popped up where Murph's view should have been. Simulation complete. Objective achieved. Hostage secured. Score, 100 out of 100. Method, gastronomic diplomacy. In her lab, Dr. Knox stared at the results flowing onto her screen. Her jaw was slack. She had designed a perfect logical trap, a Kobayashi Maru of social interaction, and Murph had beaten it by offering to cook. The data is, she whispered, a slow grin spreading across her face. The data is beautiful. She leaned forward, already planning the next trial. More stimulus is required. The hangar bay was a vast, zero-gravity cavern filled with the hulking shapes of combat mechs. The next trial, 5-on-1, and not the fun kind. 5 of the Academy's top cadets, all Atolians, were strapped into state-of-the-art Warhawk assault mechs, sleek, powerful machines bristling with plasma cannons and missile pods. Murph was strapped into the cockpit of his ride. It was a pack mule, a stripped-down two-legged utility mech used for hauling cargo. It had no weapons, reinforced armor, or advanced targeting systems. It had 2 powerful hydraulic gripping arms and beefed-up maneuvering thrusters. It was, essentially, a flying forklift. This seems fair, Murph said into his comms, his voice echoing in the small cockpit. From the observation deck, Glorben's voice projected calmly in his mind. The mycoid was patched into his comms with Lieutenant Kreeslax's explicit authorization. The cephalid, now morbidly fascinated, had approved Glorben's request to be an official observer.
I want every aberrant variable documented for the expulsion hearing.
Kreeslax had gurgled to his aide, a justification that barely concealed his own burning curiosity.
The probability of your survival is calculated at 0.034%,
Glorben transmitted.
This does not account for what you term Murph logic. Therefore, the data is unreliable.
In her lab, Dr. Knox watched the proceedings with glee. With a few quiet commands, routed through a mislabeled diagnostic port she herself had installed, she accessed the Aetolian mech's core systems. "Safety limiters are so limiting," she chirped, disabling the weapon output regulators on the Warhawks. Their cannons would now fire at 150% of their rated power. The recoil would be hell on their targeting, but the destructive potential would be magnificent. This will force a much more decisive, data-rich confrontation. She sat back, steepled her fingers, and waited for the show.
Trial begins now.
Kreeslax's voice boomed through the hangar. The 5 Aetolian mechs powered up, their energy signatures flooding Murph's simple sensors.
Hit it,
Murph yelled.
"As you command, great benefactor,"
Glorben replied. From the observation deck's comm system, a news signal was broadcast on an open, wideband frequency. It was a wall of sound, distorted electric guitar, pounding drums, and a screaming vocalist that flooded the hangar. To Murph, it was just loud music, but the Aetolians and their highly advanced Warhawks were in agony. Their sensitive audio pickups were completely overwhelmed. Their high-resolution displays flickered with audiovisual static.
"What is that infernal racket?"
The Aetolian flight leader shouted.
"The lead Aetolian pilot is experiencing what I believe you call a tantrum,"
Glorben noted.
"His targeting solution is suboptimal."
"Fire at will! Destroy that piece of junk!"
the leader commanded. The Warhawks opened fire. Overloaded plasma blasts slammed into the hangar walls, filling the air with the smell of scorched insulators and flash-vaporized durasteel. Huge gashes were torn in the metal. Murph wasn't flying away from the fire. He was flying towards the chaos. He juked his simple mech left, letting the plasma bolt singe the air where he had been. It struck a large wall panel, shearing it from its moorings. Murph swooped in, grabbed the massive plate with his pack mule's hydraulic claws, and spun, using it as a makeshift shield. 2 more Aetolians fired. Their overpowered shots slammed into the panel, turning it slag white but absorbing the impact.
"Pilot 2 and 3 are frustrated,"
Glorben narrated dryly.
"They are attempting to flank your shield. Their coordination is poor due to auditory distress. Tell me when they're about to bump uglies."
Murph grunted, wrestling with his controls.
"They are on a collision course in 3, 2... They have bumped uglies."
Blinded by their own weapons fire and deafened by the rock anthem, the 2 flanking Aetolians smashed into each other with a deafening crunch of metal. They drifted, dead in the water. 2 down. The Aetolian leader, enraged, overcharged his main cannon. Murph heard the telltale high-pitched whine. He flew straight up into the freshly mangled superstructure of the ceiling. The leader's shot missed him entirely, blasting a new gaping hole in the hangar's outer hull. Alarms blared, emergency containment fields snapped into place, but Murph was already through the hole, in the service crawl space between the hangar and the station's outer skin. He found what he was looking for, the main power conduit for the hangar bay. He gripped it with his pack mule's claws.
"Sorry about this,"
he muttered, and pulled. Inside the hangar, the lights, gravity, generators, and weapon systems of the 3 remaining Aetolian mechs died instantly. They were left floating in the dark, powerless, deaf, and utterly defeated. Trial complete. All opponents neutralized. Victor, Cadet Delgado. Murph piloted his battered forklift back through the hole, the rock anthem finally fading out. He hadn't fired a single shot. That night, Kreslak sat in his quarters. The brine-scented air did nothing to calm him. On his main screen, he played the recording of the mech trial. The first time he watched it, all he saw was infuriating, incomprehensible luck. The second time, he muted the obnoxious music and saw the pattern. The third time, with sensor data overlaid, he saw the logic. Murph hadn't been fighting 5 advanced mechs. He had been fighting 5 overconfident, sensor-deafened pilots. He didn't attack their armor. He attacked their senses. He used their own strength against them. He saw the method in the madness. It was a different kind of order, a symphony of destruction conducted by a blind man. Kreslak closed the file. His tentacles rested motionlessly on his console. The expression on his face was a complex mixture of profound annoyance and a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Grudging, sickening, undeniable comprehension. The universe he knew had a crack in it, and a blindfolded human was peering through. Commander Year stood on the bridge of the Aegis Citadel, his towering saurian frame silhouetted against the starfield. "The Aetolians are demanding his expulsion," his aide reported. Year gave a slow, rumbling chuckle. "The Corsairs don't care about honor. They don't break ships. They break morale. This human, he seems to operate exclusively in the seams." He turned. "I've authorized the final trial. I need to know what this cadet is made of. Not his body, not his machine, his core." "Sir," the aide hesitated, the mind weave is extreme, especially for a species as psychologically volatile as humans." "This human is an anomaly," Year said. "Proceed." Murph found himself in a quiet, sterile chamber, being helped into a sensory deprivation tank. "You can take the blindfold off for this, son," a kindly medical tech said. "The tank is completely dark anyway." "Nah, I'm good," Murph replied, adjusting the knot. "It's kind of my thing now." He settled back into the water, and the lid of the tank hissed shut. The Academy's 2 chief telepaths, a pair from the Order of Ondul whose bodies were composed of what looked like shifting, polished obsidian, settled into their meditative states. "Initiating synaptic link," the first projected. "Entering the subject's consciousness." They slipped into Murph's mind and were met with a tidal wave of psychic noise. They expected a landscape to manipulate. Instead, they found a stadium, a roaring, sold-out arena of the mind. There was no internal monologue to read, no quiet subconscious to probe. There was only the full-blown synthetic assault of a rock opera. Murph was mentally on stage, wielding a guitar. The opening synthesizer riff of The Final Countdown blared through his consciousness, not as sound, but as a multisensory experience. He could feel the imagined vibration of the bass, taste the scorch from the pyrotechnics, feel the psychic roar of 100,000 adoring fans. The Ondul telepaths reeled. They tried to project a stimulus, an image of failure. It was swallowed whole, repurposed as a screaming guitar solo. They tried to manifest his deepest fear. The psychic feedback was deafening, the sheer unadulterated joy and volume of Murph's internal state, acting as the most powerful psychic shield they had ever encountered. The Ondul telepaths recoiled, ripping their consciousnesses free with a collective mental shriek. In the control room, a single frantic message flashed on screen from their terminal.
Subject's internal monologue is a weapon of mass disruption. The attempt is physically painful. We are finished. Repeat, finished. We require space aspirin and quiet contemplation.
The lid of the flotation tank hissed open. Murph sat up, stretching.
Wow,
he said. Great nap. Really centered myself in there. He had passed the unpassable test by being gloriously untestable. Years stared at the blinking red lights, a slow reptilian smile spreading across his features. A deep, shuddering boom rocked the entire station, throwing Murph against the side of the tank. Red alert klaxons blared.
What was that?
Murph shouted. Over the station-wide comms, a panicked voice cried out.
Hull breach in Sector Gamma. Multiple contacts, Corsair signatures. They're blowing through our defense grid. This isn't a drill!
Another explosion, closer this time, sent sparks showering from a ceiling conduit. The simulations were over. Commandant Year stood his ground on the auxiliary bridge.
Status report.
Their attack isn't following any recognized doctrine, sir.
An officer yelled.
They're targeting key structural points with pinpoint accuracy.
On one screen, Kreeslax's face appeared.
Commandant, they're boarding.
On another, Dr. Knox popped up, ecstatic.
Commandant Year, their movements aren't random. They're systematically targeting structural weaknesses based on common galactic engineering standards. They're disassembling the station.
Year looked from the panicked fleet report to Kreeslax's desperate defense to Knox's brilliant analysis. Order was failing. Doctrine was a death sentence. He needed a different kind of weapon.
Find me, Delgado.
The corridor lights flickered. Murph and Glorbin were pinned down behind an overturned supply cart as plasma bolts stitched fiery patterns across the opposite bulkhead, the air filling with the acrid smell of burnt plasteel. A squad of 5 Corsairs were advancing. Murph's comm crackled. It was Kreeslax.
Delgado, status.
Having a bit of a disagreement with some heavily armored tourists, sir.
Murph yelled back.
We're near the F mess hall.
Negative. We're pinned down. I need a diversion, Delgado. Any diversion.
A diversion? Murph's head snapped up. Beneath the battle, he heard the faint, rhythmic whirring of the automated food dispensers. Glorbin, you still with me? My physical form is cowering, but my consciousness is resolute. The mycoid projected. I need you to guide my hands. There's a power junction for the cafeteria systems on this wall. Guided by Glorbin, Murph ripped open a panel. Okay, hotwire the main dispenser feed to the sanitation bot network and overload it. You need to weaponize lunch, Glorbin stated. Waste nut, want nut. Murph grinned, jamming 2 conduits together. From the mess hall entrance, a wave of automated machines surged into the corridor, spraying torrents of superheated adhesive nutrient paste. The Corsair squad was hit by a tidal wave of sticky beige goo. It gummed up their exosuits and clogged their weapons, turning the 5 mercenaries into a single sticky, immobilized sculpture of failure. On the auxiliary bridge, Year watched the security feed. He saw the Corsair squad neutralized. He looked at Knox's screen, at the Corsair's patterns, then at the display showing Murph's unpredictable defense. Kreeslax, Year commanded. I'm giving you a new primary weapon, Cadet Delgado. Give him objectives, not orders. Dr. Knox, you will be his eyes. Feed him the enemy's weak points. Let's see what happens when our chaos meets theirs. A single gurgle of acceptance came from Kreeslax.
Understood, Commandant.
Kreeslax, embracing the madness, opened a channel.
Delgado, Knox reports the Corsair command team is using the main ventilation shaft to bypass our checkpoints. Objective, stop them.
On it, sir. Murph replied, already moving. The primary ventilation hub is directly below us. Glorbin projected. Murph found the control panel as Knox's voice crackled in his ear. I'm slicing through the safeties now. You should have full manual override. He slammed his palm on a large red button.
Reverse flow at maximum power.
In the ventilation shaft, the Corsair squad was blasted back out the vent they had entered, tumbling through space. "Objective complete, sir," Murph said. "What's next?"
The command ship is docked at Bay 9, providing fire support.
Kreeslax relayed. Murph was already running.
The gauntlet is right next to Bay 9, Knox. Reroute all non-essential power to the gauntlet. All of it. Done, she chirped.
Murph reached the gauntlet's control room. He activated the piston traps, setting them to fire all at once, over and over in a steady, percussive rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. The overloaded pistons hammered against the station's inner hull. The rhythmic shockwave traveled through the docking clamps and into the enemy ship's frame, rattling their sensors and crew into uselessness. It was all the opening the Academy ships needed. They rallied, blasting the disoriented command ship free. The remaining Corsairs beat a hasty retreat. In the aftermath, years stood in the battered hangar bay before Kreeslax, Knox, and Murph. The Aetolian Empire has sent a formal apology, Years said. Your protest, Cadet, has reshaped galactic military theory. He stepped forward. Earth Command has also been in touch. They send their congratulations and their apologies for your friend Ainz. Changes are being made. That simulation has been permanently decommissioned. Year looked at Murph. You have won, son. On every front. The battle is over. He gestured to Murph's face. You can take off the blindfold now. Murph stopped humming. A slow, easy grin spread across his face. He reached up with both hands, his fingers touching the simple black cloth. But he didn't untie it. He just adjusted the knot, making it a little more comfortable. With all due respect, Commander, he said, his voice clear and steady. The universe makes a lot more sense this way.